most businesses today, they're platforms, essentially. All of them are platforms, right?
True.
So they're trying to connect one party with another party through technology.
Hello and welcome everybody to your favorite CX show, the Engati CX show. I'm your host Rahul, and today we have a technology expert with us on the show. But before I introduce you to our guest, allow me to introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform available across 14 channels, with 35,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by Inc.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, the video channel, and of course, the Engati CX podcast that you guys love, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest, amazing Aleksandra is there on the show, and Aleksandra Przegalinska, and she is an associate professor at Kosminski University. She was the former MIT Research Fellow and future Harvard Senior Research Fellow. She has a PhD in artificial intelligence and is interested in new technologies, sustainable technological growth, and media studies, as well as critical theory and system organization theory. Her current specialization is in wearable tech. So welcome, Aleksandra, to the show. Such an honor to have you on board.
Thank you so much for the invitation. What you did not add, but I could, is that I'm also working in natural language processing and in bots. So I'm even kind of more happy to be here with Engati today.
That's amazing. So that's a domain that we both, are mutual at. So that's great to hear. And before we dive into the great, amazing interview, I'm sure with Aleksandra, I'd like all of you to subscribe to our channel and tap on the bell icon to get access to exclusive content from thought leaders around the globe. And amazing people like Aleksandra come to our show. They talk about CX, digital transformation, AI, all that cool stuff. So you don't want to miss on that. So click on the subscribe button and push the bell notification. So moving on to the first question, Aleksandra, that I have for you is, let's say somebody like a newbie, right? So how can a newbie go about starting something in AI and building a business model that keeps technology at the center?
That's a good question. I think many people have it these days, even those that are not so familiar with programming, coding, and whatnot. And I would say that, good news is that I think, are past the, let's say, era when we just talk about artificial intelligence without doing it. So now is the productive moment when things are happening, and across different domains, you have so many different applications of AI. And together with that comes another important thing, which is simplification, because now you can code, let's say, even a bot, a simple one, without coding per se. You can just use some building blocks. You can use drag and drop tools to create a data scientific experiment, a flow, a prediction. And I think it's a very relevant change that is happening, that many different players, across the technological sector are building more and more tools that allow you to familiarize yourself with this technology, with artificial intelligence, that is quite complex, but in a friendly manner. And they create interfaces that are more user-friendly, even if you're a user that is not, specializing in AI. So I would say, if you see a case study, or use case for artificial intelligence in a business that you're building, the most important question is, what is that use case and how can it be done? And only the secondary question is, what tools you're going to use and who's going to do it. Because in fact, I think with this growth of simplification in AI, it's actually not so hard, either to find someone or to just try and build even some things on your own. The most important thing is to kind of find or understand and map this horizon of artificial intelligence. It's many different things, many domains. So you need to know whether you're looking for segmentation, you want to do some more targeted marketing with artificial intelligence, you want to do prediction or market forecasting. What is it that you're trying to do with it? And when you know that, I think tools are like a secondary problem to you.
Right, absolutely. What I actually love is that, the major question in people's mind used to be like, hey, how do we do this? Like, how do we go about this complex alien technology and kind of like get our use case done? But now the conversation has shifted. Okay, like I know, okay, we can figure that out, but what's the actual problem that we need to solve? What's the end goal with things? And I think that's a positive step towards things, because we've moved past that, as you mentioned, and that's a very clever point that you put out there. And now moving to my next question, which is a very interesting term that I see here. So what exactly is technological foresight? And what parameters do we need to gauge to estimate the technologies that will boom in short span of time and in the long run? Because I think, post the pandemic, a lot of the research and the conversation is around, because we saw that there is a great scope in in increase in technology. The curve is like amazing. So a lot of people are having this conversation that, what's the new wave that's going to come through? So what are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think, pandemics was a very interesting exercise. During the pandemics, for instance, quite early already in the times of pandemics, it turned out that artificial intelligence, or specifically natural language, processing tool called Blue Dot, I guess, was able to predict a weak signal of something happening, in fact, in Wuhan, right?
Oh.
So it tells us that artificial intelligence is itself a very interesting forecasting tool, in the sense of perhaps sensing some weak signals of some phenomena happening that we need to prepare better for, right? Was it used enough? I don't think so. Maybe next time, hopefully there won't be any next time, but if there is a next time, we will be able to kind of really use the potential that artificial intelligence gives us also in this medical field, public health, a bit better. But you've asked about foresight, and I do think that, pandemics has also taught us that there are those, black swans. So the unexpected phenomena happening, that emerge and kind of transform your reality. And we've just had it. We just experienced exactly this, a black swan. This time it was COVID. And I feel like, many companies started thinking, okay, how should I prepare myself better for different possibilities of the future? And can I think in a scenario-based model? And that's exactly what foresight kind of is about, or kind of, let's say, it's not future prediction, it's more of a speculation, let's say, but you are thinking in diverse ways. So for instance, I work at a university, and right now we have at least two scenarios on the table. Either we continue with online education, or we move to hybrid or offline forms of education if the situation allows. And I think it's like that. It's like planning beforehand and trying to kind of always in your head figure out what are the options that can distort the plan that you have, and what would you do then, right? And that's exactly what foresight is about. But when you think about technological foresight and what technologies are emerging, there are obviously also let's say, maybe not strategic, but some very interesting tools available out there. So I would recommend perhaps Gartner Hype Cycle. It's a pretty interesting tool that is, the results are usually available to everybody widely. And what it tells us is that there's a certain hype, usually, about a given technology, and it rises up to a certain point where there can be more hype than it is. And from that point onwards, kind of the hype goes down. And when it reaches the bottom, there are two versions. Either the technology becomes obsolete and we forget about it, or actually it becomes productive, right? And when it's a productive technology, that's something that works, like AI, machine learning, deep learning. As of today, that already works, we know, right? But there are some, things like smart dust, or embedded AI, or adaptive AI, right? Augmented AI that are coming, right? And when you look at this curve, you can say to yourself, okay, where is it exactly in the hype cycle, right? Is it an early phase, or is it something that is already a bit more mature, and then perhaps something that already has some even limited use cases, and something that I could think productively about before others do? So I would say, obviously, the hype cycle is not the only tool like that, but it's good to really think, about these emerging technologies as something where we can really separate stuff that is just pure gossip, and buzz, from stuff that is productive. And maturity of technology, even rising technology, tells us a lot about that, and what is realistic and what is not.
True. Yeah. And it's amazing that you mentioned about the hype cycle, because the curve is pretty evident, and we've seen this evolving with every technology. And now the real question is that it's good that AI has picked up, but like you mentioned, embedded AI and all the other stuff. The question is, where does that go? That's absolutely correct. Well, moving on to my next question, and I think we have so many interesting terms out here when it comes to your interview. So what exactly is digital capitalism? Where did the term come from, and what's the current state of it like?
Yeah. Well, a colleague of mine and myself, we published a book called Collaborative Society recently with MIT Press, and it's kind of about the current state of affairs when you think about merging algorithms with the modus operandi or the business model that companies usually follow. So what we were arguing for is that you can think about two forms essentially that are ways of collaborating that is mediated through technology. One is that you're doing something like Wikipedia, right, which is essentially a collaborative movement of people that are, using technology to voluntarily create content and share it with others, and through that create a digital encyclopedia. They're not particularly like profit driven in that it's, something that they just want to do to contribute somehow. And obviously, it's a very interesting social phenomenon, right? That tells you that you can build a consolidated community even without any direct incentives, and that people will follow it. Right. But there's also another model, which is, okay, you're gonna use, all those digital formats and the tools that digital transformation has brought to kind of embed yourself with your business in the capitalist platform format that we're currently seeing, right? So when you think about, most businesses today, they're platforms, essentially. All of them are platforms, right? True. So they're trying to connect one party with another party through technology. True. And you see that in Uber, you see that in Airbnb. So I would say it's a very prevalent model, right? So when we were discussing digital capitalism, we were saying, okay, it's always about certain community building. It's always about certain reciprocity or exchange, right, of ideas, services, products, whatnot. Right. But it can be realized in two formats. One is, for instance, this example also, I don't know if you've experienced that, but during the pandemics in Poland, people were 3D printing face masks and shields at home. Right. Also for each other, for neighbors, right? And they were using technology to send the files, to another person, so that person knows how to print it, and so on and so forth. So they were really acting when hospitals were too full and, the government was kind of too slow to react. They were just mobilizing themselves and using technology. Right. So that's one thing. But another thing is that this business as usual, the platform-driven business is mostly now about like big crowds of people that are online and managing them somehow, right? And setting up certain technological platforms that allow you to kind of distinguish what they want, those crowds, right? And then connect them with others that can fulfill that. And I guess that's essentially what digital capitalism today, as of today, is about. We'll see where that goes, but as of today, I think escaping this platform model and thinking about something else is very, very hard.
Yeah, I think so. And like you rightly mentioned, a lot of it is platform model. It's about connecting people and getting stuff that what they want done. So yeah, absolutely true. And it's interesting also, like, when you think about it, you mentioned Uber. And now that I think about it, oh yeah, I mean, it makes all sense. It connects all dots. Well, moving on to my next question, and you mentioned about international technology transfer, right? So yeah. Are there any like geographical barriers when it comes to expanding your technology to like different geographies?
Well, I think there are several challenges. Obviously, when it comes to software, those challenges are not so big as when it comes to hardware. That's why nobody wants to do robotics, because it's just maintenance and you're selling a product piece by piece and you have to take care of it along the way. So software is easier that way and it spreads much better, it's more scalable. But I would say there are certain things that are associated with understanding your customer and your customer's needs, right? So algorithms are pretty good at doing it today, right? But they are not, really building a very robust and full picture, right, of what people want. And also, I think, in expanding to different markets, you really have to understand not only the customers of that market better, but also, the circumstances and your environment, right?
Absolutely.
So when you think of geopolitically, for instance, now in the US and in China, you have many similar platforms exactly operating, right? And let's say they're offering certain catered services to the users in different domains. And I don't think it would be easy to kind of say for an American company that we exactly would like to go there, because, you know, the competitor exists and does pretty similar things and knows the customers also way better. So I would say, you know, you have now strategies related to artificial intelligence, and you see that, for instance, you know, there are certain exchanges that work quite well when it comes to talent flow. That works really well. You know, let's say India, a vast hub of very good data scientists, you know, who work globally as of today. The same I could say about Russian programmers or Polish programmers who are doing a great job, but this doesn't mean that the full product, you know, and that the service can be widely sold. I had actually a friend who was doing very interesting robotics stuff, and it worked really well in Europe. In the US, he already had some problems related to licensing that, because it turned out that it's much, much more difficult, and that's something he didn't really check in his due diligence, how difficult that would be to obtain the patent, right? For instance, in the patent law, how differently it works. And then expanding to, you know, markets such as China that are fairly consolidated and kind of closed inside, I think makes another very, very important step. So I would say there are many similar ideas worldwide that people pursue. But if you have that very good idea, there is a strong chance somebody else in a different circumstance is doing exactly the same, and they will probably have that unfair advantage of the first comer to the market. So I would say, yeah, in software, we tend to think, yeah, technology is global. But in fact, there are many different technologies worldwide that are doing the same things.
Yeah. So like it goes back to your first point that you mentioned, that software is easier, it's better, and it spreads better, right?
It does. So there are limits to it, but it does.
Hey, but yeah, you know, like once it spreads better, you already know there are people in other parts of the world that are already doing it better than you probably. And maybe they are in that market better and they understand the culture of that market too. So, you know, it makes it easier for them too. Absolutely. Well, now talking about something like one of the most interesting things that you've done, and that's like digitization policy that you've worked on for the European Union, right? So when it comes to something like that, like what things do we have to cover when we are like making policies on a very broad level?
Well, you know, I was advising the European Parliament, and also I was sort of involved in designing the Polish strategy of artificial intelligence, and I was able to compare many different policies and documents. So obviously you have to be very careful in order not to overkill the idea. That's one thing, you know. Just my anecdote here is that usually we first invent a car and then only seat belts, right? You cannot do it the other way around. So those seat belts that you're building, certain regulations, they cannot be too tight, right? And you have to sometimes wait for certain maturity of technology. Like we just mentioned, smart dust. Maybe there would be some people who say, okay, this sounds like a very, very extravagant idea. Let's just ban it right now, right away, right? But the thing with technology is that it's very fragile in a way, and you have to, in order to do a foresight and understand where this technology can take you, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, different scenarios of usage and possible threats also, you need to have very good information about how this technology works, and certain beta testing at least already done. So I think with those large scale strategies, the first idea, for instance, when it comes to artificial intelligence, is how to incentivize, right? People to kind of really, mainstream this application of artificial intelligence, right? So if you are working in logistics, in education, you should know that there will be, or are already, tools for you in terms of artificial intelligence that you can use. If you're a historian, maybe natural language processing will help you in finding keywords in very old texts, or, you know, like certain blocks of text that you need. You're like comparing different documents from a certain era. If you're a pharmacist, AI can help you in, you know, finding therapy for like a certain disease, right? Or vaccination, for that matter. So I think, you know, you should incentivize in the first place to kind of say, okay, there's a spot for everyone here. And the more broadly we use it, the more broad our like digital competences to actually use artificial intelligence, the better for all of us in general. And you have to kind of make that claim. On the other hand, you have to say, okay, there are certain areas in which we want, for instance, that's definitely what European Union is pursuing, that there are certain values that we care about, such as privacy. and we would like to safeguard it, right? So in the context of development of artificial intelligence, we still need to bear in mind that this type of AI that will be implemented, built here in Europe or in alliances with different other countries has to kind of respect certain rules regarding sensitive data, privacy, and other matters that are important here, don't have to be important elsewhere, but are important here. So I would say that in those policies, usually you have two components, right? One is saying yes to this technology and trying to scale it, right? To different means. Incentivization is very broad, right? You can co-fund something, you can, donate public funds for certain types of research. You can also just mainstream the idea and promote it. And the other part is just to kind of understand where is it necessary to step in with certain regulations that either ban you from something or at least recommending to kind of, really pay attention to a certain problem and try to address it in the near future when we know a bit more about this technology. So I think these are the two very relevant components, and across all I would say strategic documents that I've seen, Norwegian strategy, Canadian strategy, European Union, OECD, some companies have their own strategies like, Microsoft, IBM, or others. They're just released their own AI strategies. You always have that component of, what do I say about human rights, controllability, explainability, and other things, but also how do I make sure that this technology is widely used, because that's actually something that makes it safe and working well for us.
Right, absolutely. Well, you can't think about inventing a seatbelt before inventing the actual car.
Yes.
And that's right there, what you've dropped right there, Aleksandra, is an Engati gem. So ladies and gentlemen, Engati Przegalinska for you guys, exclusively on Engati CX. This has been a fantastic conversation, Aleksandra. So many fresh insights, so many great ideas. Before we close out, are there any other thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, I would like to, encourage everyone, particularly those newbies that you mentioned, to really explore the topic of AI foundations, right? There are so many courses out there where you can try to familiarize yourself with technology and get to know it better. And once you do, I think you will be able to make an informed decisions whether you want to code, you want to take that further, or whether you want to focus on something more strategic, but at least you know what you're talking about. So this is like something I would encourage everyone to do in the spirit of democratizing AI, making it widely available to everyone.
Right. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. None other than the amazing Aleksandra Przegalinska for you guys. Thank you so much, Aleksandra, for giving us your time, and your insights were amazing. And I know our audience are really going to enjoy this interview.
Thank you so much.
All the links to Aleksandra's socials will be mentioned in the show notes. So go check her out and go and reach out to her if you guys have any other doubts. So we'll be back with a new episode and a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned and we'll see you around for the next one. Thank you.